Hey guys, Level Cap here. The Battlefield 1 Apocalypse DLC it dropped today. We're going to talk about that and how DICE broke the game in just a second. But first, let's watch this actually really cool trailer.
In the end, there will be no one left. We are no longer innocent. We are lost from this world. From home. We no longer believe in such things. We only believe in war.
Now that's a pretty cool trailer, I gotta say, but before we get into the content of the DLC, the maps, the modes, the balance, the weapons, all that stuff, let's talk about how DICE broke the game. They've introduced a massive amount of micro-stutter when you kill enemy players. I think it can also micro-stutter the game in other areas as well. Let me show you an example. This is me trying out the new Air Assault mode, and you'll notice right when I'm about to get a kill, the frames are going to pause up for a bit. This is not YouTube messing up. I'll play it a few times. You can see it's literally just pausing my game for a 20th or a 10th of a second at times, making it incredibly not only difficult to fly, but when you're playing on infantry game modes, it's very hard to get follow-up kills when your game is chunking and stuttering all the time. Now, I personally have been suffering from serious stutter issues in Battlefield 1 for about the past 3 months. I've messaged some of the devs about it. I've found other people with the same problems on forums. Some of my friends are now experiencing stutter issues in Battlefield 1. This seems like an exacerbated version of that same stutter issue I've been dealing with for a long time. Prior to this update, some people were saying turning off turbo boost actually helped reduce the stutter. I ended up pinning my CPU to the boosted clock speed, and that really helped reduce a lot of my micro stutter. But as you can see, it's still in the game right now, and it's definitely exacerbated by the latest patch. Hopefully, DICE will now finally take the time needed to look into this issue and figure out what's actually going on. A lot of people are linking the micro stutter to any time that they generate points on screen, while others are experiencing more around when you get kills. I think it might actually have something to do with the assignments. Some of the devs are already theorizing that if you untrack some of the assignments, it will reduce the issue. You guys can certainly play around with this on your own. Hopefully we can find some quick fixes before DICE issues the next patch, and hopefully that next patch does not take too long, as this is a pretty darn serious issue in the game right now, and I've already seen a lot of people saying, you know what, I'm not going to play until this gets fixed because it's just too darn annoying. Now, before we get into the infantry side of things, let's talk about the new game mode, Air Assault. This is the 100% airplane game mode. There's no running around as infantry. You can gun for a behemoth if you're not great at flying, or you can gun for an attack plane or a bomber or something like that if you just want to experience the game mode but you don't like the flying side of things. But I will say, if you don't enjoy flying, you're probably not going to enjoy this game mode. Personally, I think it's a really fun little time waster. It's a great way to practice your flying skills and sort of hone in your aiming or accuracy. It's also a good way to rank up the pilot class if you're so inclined to do so. Even though you don't get any actual rewards for it, it's an easy way to do it. I think I ranked it up twice just playing in 2 different games. The visuals, especially on London Calling, are really impressive. I definitely like playing on London Calling more because of the behemoth factor. It sort of spices up the gameplay a little more, whereas the full-on dogfighter game mode, where it's just airplanes fighting other airplanes, is a little less interesting because it's essentially just pure TDM, where on London Calling you can retreat to your behemoth and try and use your teammates to back you up with their anti-aircraft guns and get fighters off of your tail. There's more to it. There's different kinds of airplanes. It's just more interesting overall. Now, unfortunately, there just doesn't seem to be that many people interested in the pure flying experience in Battlefield 1, and even on day 1 of the DLC. Granted, I wasn't playing at peak hours, but we weren't able to get a single server fully populated. So it's supposed to be 20 versus 20 in these games, and we rarely even got close to that. So that's a bit unfortunate overall, and it's probably a good indicator of how long this game mode's going to last with this DLC. So if you want to try it out, you better get into it now before you can't find any servers. Alright, let's talk about one of my favorite things about the Apocalypse DLC, and that is the map Psalm. This map is how I would personally design a Battlefield map. It has great opportunities for sniping, but it also has plenty of opportunities to flank and get in close quarters with close quarter weapons. There's a massive trench network that goes through these wide open fields, allowing for a variety of gameplay. There's no aircraft, so you don't have to worry about airplanes coming down and dominating you from overhead, and there's limited vehicles, and they're actually focused on the land ships, so you need to use teamwork in order to make your tanks work, and there's limited tanks. So to me, that really does make this map sort of the perfect Battlefield cocktail. Also, it's visually beautiful. I really like the look of the map in general. The one thing that I'm not a huge fan of is that Conquest Assault seems to be one of the featured game modes on this map, and I think Conquest Assault is kind of a trash game mode in general. It's hard to balance, and it doesn't balance well on this map. The spawning team on the assaulter side can easily get spawn camped at the very start of the round. So if that team is not careful, it could be a very, very uninteresting and bad game. I think this map is generally probably much better on Conquest, but if the assaulting team does break out on Conquest Assault, then it could lead to some better gameplay overall. The next map here is called Passchendaele, and this is a really cool map. This is sort of what I always envisioned a World War I Battlefield game would look like, and they do such a cool job of it here with the Frostbite engine. You've got embers coming off of these trees, just muddy trenches, algae or green gas in the pools of water at the bottom of craters. Like, it is a depressing map, and I think it kind of represents what a lot of people were expecting from sort of that gritty World War I warfare. Now, this map suffers from what I would call the BF1 conquest problem, which is that the points on flags are worth so much, whether it's Conquest or Conquest Assault, that it encourages players to run towards objectives rather than towards each other at certain times, or it encourages them to avoid fighting because the points you get from flags are worth so much. You get sort of this bunch ball scenario where both teams are sort of bunched up on opposite ends of the map, and they're playing a long game of ring around the rosy, avoiding the general combat of both forces hitting each other at once, because it's just more profitable point-wise to go for the flags instead of fighting each other. So that's my issue with this map. It's a beautiful looking map. It could work in older Battlefield games because of the way that Conquest works on those games. There isn't as big of an emphasis that you have to be on a flag to actually stay competitive on the scoreboard. There's also a high degree of chaos on this map, which I do think is sort of the point, the all-out chaotic warfare in this like just sort of broken trench warfare map. I like it in general. I think, again, it just suffers from that Conquest issue, which could be fixed with some general Conquest tweaks overall, but I don't think that's going to happen at this point. Then we have the map Caporetto, which features the Livens launcher. This here is what I'm going to activate. You can look over and see it launching tons of canisters of gas through the map, which is sort of the like gimmicky appeal of this map. You can make giant clouds of green gas that will not really decimate the enemy, but you'll get some kills with it. It can be fun to use. The majority of the map takes place on the side of this hill or mountain here. There's a lot of rocky terrain and sort of the lack of lanes, if you will. You can really go anywhere you want on this map. There's tons of cover, tons of rocks all over the place, but planes will dominate you. I was flying around in an attack plane for quite a while, pretty much the whole round, just dominating the enemy team. There didn't seem to be an abundance of anti-aircraft cannons, so if the enemy pilots are not shooting you down, it could be quite annoying on this map to have to deal with the pilots. And that's one of my pet peeves with Battlefield 1, is that pilots can really ruin the infantry experience for one team if they go unchecked, and I think this is definitely one of those maps where that can happen. Visually speaking, we get a little bit of a muted color palette, which tends to happen when sunset is the time of day in which the map takes place. I don't know what it is. I've been playing a lot of shooters lately that have really gone gung-ho on these sunset settings for their maps, and to me they just look awful in terms of like trying to do target acquisition and see your enemies clearly. I don't like it for gameplay. It looks great if you're going to take a screenshot and frame it on your wall, but for the actual gameplay, I'm not a huge fan of this map visually. Now, as for the weapons in this DLC, I've already done a preliminary weapon review in my CTE coverage of the Apocalypse DLC. I'm waiting for the Synthic stats to come out so we can do a more in-depth review of these weapons. The really good thing, though, about the new DLC weapons is that the unlock requirements are basic. They're straightforward. It's like get 50 kills with this class and you'll unlock the new gun. Then it's like get 50 more kills with the new gun and do some other team-oriented requirements and you'll unlock the next iteration of this weapon. They're all straightforward, they make sense, they don't take away from the teamwork, and they don't put you on weird, obscure, annoying missions like get 50 melee kills on a specific map or get 50 tripwire bomb kills, things that are going to make you play in a very unorthodox way or in a way that's not going to help your team out. And that's nice to see that DICE has shied away from this a little bit. Unfortunately, though, DICE did still go ahead with their plans for the afflictions. They're in the game, basically things you can modify your soldier with that give them negative properties that are going to make it harder for your team to win. And by using them, you can unlock dog tags. This is really unfortunate. I'm sure we're going to see a bunch of people running around with these afflictions so that they can get their cool custom dog tags and show them off in game. DICE did not change their plan for the afflictions, despite the overwhelming community feedback saying that we don't really want this in the game. So in terms of my day one impressions of this DLC, it's a mixed bag. It's got a map that I absolutely love. I think it's one of the better maps that's been released in Battlefield 1 so far. Obviously, the introduction of a serious frame stuttering issue for basically everyone playing the game is a massive problem. Not really part of what I would consider the DLC content, but it is an issue that DICE has to fix pretty much immediately. Overall, the DLC it's nice that there's new content for the game. There's new weapons that we'll be getting into soon, but I would say this is a mixed bag. It's definitely not one of the stronger DLCs. I think the Russian DLC was one of the strongest DLCs, and it doesn't really have a strong underlying theme that I think a lot of people were excited about. It's sort of like Apocalypse, here's a bunch of maps in which intense battles were fought, and that's kind of been an ongoing theme for most of the maps in Battlefield 1. So it doesn't really have anything to sort of catch your eye. It doesn't have a super tank from the French DLC. It doesn't have massive destroyers and naval combat from the most recent DLC. And it doesn't have a ton of awesome weapons from the Russian DLC. So definitely a bit underwhelming when you stack it up against the other DLCs. We'll be getting into the weapon reviews and the stats a little bit later. As always, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.